Hello, cadets, and welcome to Leadership Day, Leaders 411, the pandemic version. We're virtual this year. We've got a very special guest from Microsoft, Jeff Tozzi. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yep, that's right. Yep.
Jeff Tozzi from Microsoft. So I'm going to have Jeff introduce himself. We're going to talk a little bit about his leadership experience and how you might better build a vision for your future from where you're sitting today. So Jeff, take it away. Welcome.
Sounds good. I appreciate it, Tip. I'd love to just, first of all, I'll introduce myself, but then spend a little time talking about some of the values, I drive in the businesses I've led at Microsoft and other places, and some of the key values I think that are really important for leadership. But also would love to, share some thoughts with everyone as they look at their careers, some thoughts on their careers and paths they may pursue, and tips on even going after those careers. One of the things I found in, teaching at the Citadel also is I spent maybe more time in my office hours talking about interview prep and career advice than actually talking about the course itself. So I know that's really critical. So I'd love to be able to share some of those thoughts with you all too now.
By all means. So what are you doing now? Well, first of all, when did you teach at the Citadel? What did you teach? And how did you get to sort of there and where you are now?
Sure thing. Yeah. So I over the last year, this is one of the bits of advice I'll certainly talk about is, careers are always in transition. No matter if you're at one organization, multiple organizations, whatever it may be. And I myself, I spent 21 years at Microsoft. And just under a year ago, I made the decision to leave Microsoft. It was a very tough decision. I had a great experiences there. It was a great company for me. I've learned so much, met so many wonderful people. But for me, I was looking to make a different kind of transition in what I want to do. So that's when I jumped into teaching. And I started teaching a class last spring during COVID of all times, right as it kicked off. So learning to deal through change in my early new career teaching was something important, and we'll certainly talk about learning on the fly. But I'm currently an adjunct professor in the school business. I teach a negotiations class, and it's offered in the spring. So I'll make a shameless plug now too. So for anyone looking to register for a spring class, there'll be a great negotiations class. I look forward to seeing you in class. I also spend a lot of time as a mentor and advisor to students at the Citadel. So some former graduates, people that are now in the workforce, as well as some seniors today that I spend some time with, and I really enjoy that. Encourage anyone. I'm always willing if people want to reach out and talk about their careers and advice and prep as they kind of get ready for that next phase in life. I think it's really important to broaden your network, have a lot of mentors, and just super important. Outside of kind of my work stuff, I coach a local high school soccer team. So that's, an area that I just enjoy on the side. My kids spend a lot of time playing soccer. I grew up playing soccer, and it's an area I love to give back. And one thing I find, being able to have outlets outside of your career every day is just as important, and it'll help you bring something more back to the workforce too. So something as you enter your workforce, it's so easy to get absorbed in everything you do about your career. But make sure you're well-rounded as an individual too, because that'll help you both as a leader in business or whatever career you may choose, your family life and everything else. Super important. If you're not,
let me ask you, where are you coaching? What high school?
I'm an assistant coach over at Porter Goud.
Porter Goud. All right, great. Yeah. I've got a son there. So, all right. Well, let's talk about you've done a transition from a career at Microsoft. I do want you to introduce your career at Microsoft. Tell us what you did there, how you got there, basically from the time you were a senior sitting in that seat in college to where you are today. Talk about how your career progressed, and then talk about what it was. You said you were looking for something different. Had you accomplished what you wanted to do? Was it geographic? Was it a combination of things? And just let's go straight from the time where you grew up, where you went to school, and from there.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in New Jersey. And made a lot of moves along the way, mostly thankful, because of great careers, right? They gave me the opportunity to see the world, and grateful for that. I lived in, of course, with Microsoft, it's almost an area. You'd spend some time in Seattle. So I lived in Seattle for a little bit, spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C., and the Northern Virginia area. I had an opportunity with another career. I lived in the UK for a while, which was a great experience. And I'll certainly talk about that too, because I think that's important to take risks and big challenges and things you may be uncomfortable with. It really leads to good growing opportunities. But kind of, outside of all that. So, what drives me a lot is, my foundation, where I came from. And growing up, going to school, I remember being a senior at school, and for me, thinking about my career, it's stressful, right? You want to make sure, am I making the right decision, right? The first company I join, is it the right thing? How will that impact my career? And I think it's really important as you think about that. It's got to be a good fit for you and the organization both. So when you're starting to think about interviewing, not only are they interviewing you, but you really need to interview that organization and make sure that's a fit. And I think it's really important. Everyone's got a plan, but there really is no certain path, right? So whatever you choose, you'll make changes along the way. You'll make some mistakes. You'll do some great things. So a family relative once gave me a bit of advice, and stressing over a decision. And he said, "Hey, it's not a tattoo on your forehead. You can always change it." Right? So that's the one thing I'll say is don't overstress things. Follow your gut, follow your passion. You'll know when something feels right when you're pursuing something in your career, and do that. So for me, in my career, when I was a senior, I went to Seton Hall University in New Jersey. It's where I got my undergrad degree, and I got my undergrad degree in criminal justice with a minor in psych. Nothing I use today whatsoever. So a perfect example of you just never know where your path is going to go. Now, I had some great classes. I enjoyed it. I was passionate about the major, and I thought I wanted to pursue a career in law or in forensic psychology. But as I pursued that path and I started learning what was happening in the world, and this goes, I date myself too much, but this goes back to the early 90s at the time. Technology was really heating up. Companies like Microsoft and IBM were really coming about and changing the world. And that became exciting to me. So, as I was in my last year at university, I started seeing the world really changing around me, not unlike it's doing now in so many ways, where you see new advances in technology, new fields that maybe never even existed years ago, popping up. And for me, it was important to find an area I can get passionate about. I felt like it was making an impact to the world and growth. So for me, technology really stood out. So I actually jumped, and believe me, it wasn't the easiest going into a technology field without a technology degree, but really showcasing the skills, I think the foundation of my educational background, or even some of my work experiences. We'll talk about stuff like resumes and interviewing for jobs. But one thing I'll say is, you can maybe say, hey, look, I was a waiter during college, or I worked in a restaurant, right? And these are the things on your resume. And you're like, well, how does that really pertain to what job I'm going to pursue? It's not necessarily the job you did, it's the skills you developed, right? If you were, let's say, a waiter, hey, look, I learned to work independently in a fast-paced environment. I'm a fast learner. I have great customer skills. Those are the kind of things any organization would love, right? If you're willing to pick up things independently and learn and grow fast, I think people are willing to make a risk on you and make a bet. And showing passion for what you're going to do, and will you bring something to them as much as they'll bring to you, I think is going to be really important. So for me, I got that first opportunity. At the time, it was with AT&T. That's where I started my career. And I started in technology, doing, at the time, we're setting up IT networks and those kinds of things. So more of almost an engineering type role, which I had no experience in, right? I had a passion and a willingness to learn. I spent a lot of time there. And one thing I will say, if you're passionate about something, you're going to learn a lot about it, because you'll find yourself, you're reading nonstop and learning, but having a desire to. It's not just because you have to. And if you find there are areas where you catch yourself doing that, that's a good leading indicator to a field that I think is a good career choice, frankly. So if maybe you're in business, but you have a passion for what's going on in the sciences, maybe combining those two skills is really important, or vice versa. Maybe you're a bio major, but you have a knack for finance, right? Think of all the biotech companies and how they're running their operations, looking to grow and increase their profit margins. There's ways to combine all the great skills you're learning in school with areas you're passionate about. So that's, I think, really important. But for me, when I started AT&T, I started in technology. But then, like a lot of people, I think early in my career, I was, very focused on, okay, how do I continue to advance and grow my career? And one thing, for me, maybe it's naive at a younger age, you don't realize till you're older. For me, advancement was one direction. It was up. And that's how I looked at things. Versus over time, I really started to realize advancement is how you're growing and learning more and adding more and really benefiting, your organization, your customers, even yourself more. Over time, I got into different programs, and there was an opportunity at AT&T. We created a financial leadership program. The CFO of the company was running a big exposure across the company. There was opportunity to advance quickly in the company, get different experiences. I thought that was exciting. I did not have a finance degree. that was a problem getting into a financial leadership program. A common thread you'll hear me say is, I picked up and I learned it, right? Just like technology. I didn't have that background. I picked up and learned it, wanted to do it. Finance was the same thing. Picked up and learned it. I saw a book on my bookshelf over here. It's The Vest Pocket CFO. I think it was the first book I bought. I read it end to end. I basically self-studied an MBA program at the time, and just learned that and was able to maneuver my way essentially to be a visible candidate into this financial leadership program in the company. So not only in my technology job was I doing my role, I exposed myself to management, finding ways to improve our business and our organization, increase our profits as an engineer, which was unheard of, right? People weren't thinking that way, but got exposed to the leaders of the company and how we can improve our business. So looking for things each day to showcase that. I got accepted into this program, and all of a sudden, before I knew it, I was on a fast track career in finance, which again, criminal justice, psychology, IT, and now finance. Broad experiences, and it brought a lot to the table. What I didn't quite realize at the time is, wow, I was learning all these broad experiences, and it would make me so much of a well-rounded person later, and a better business leader later in my career by understanding all the components of an organization, really. Fast forward a little bit, I was at AT&T, and AT&T at the time, I mean, they were the company. It was like the, Microsoft Apple of the time in the 90s, right? When you think about technology and communications. I think they were probably one of the top market cap companies at the time as well. And they were a brand name, Coca-Cola, AT&T kind of brand name. And we went through something called a trivestiture. We spun off as a business. We spun off Lucent Technologies was a piece of the business, and NCR was another piece of the business. So AT&T was essentially breaking up. All of the people, we had 40 people in this leadership program. We got to choose which company you want to go with. Just about all, I think, maybe except for like 6 of us, chose AT&T, because why would you leave the brand, right? It was the well thought out brand, and there was another company called Lucent Technologies that spun out. No longer exists today. They merged and bought, and the way technology works, you're bought out by 10 different companies over every other year. But a couple of us chose to do that. And for us, it was kind of the path, we can go the easy path, right? And have a great career here, or, wow, this is a new business starting out, spun out from a big empire, essentially, of AT&T, with a lot of a chance to set the stage for, new rules, our own career, and really set a business where it's going to go. And that was exciting. So we did that, and I continued to pursue a path in finance, and it was a great experience. But one thing I realized, I think I was on my last role in the program, and at that time I was a controller at a wireless subsidiary in the United Kingdom. I was in my young 20s. It was they were a fast track program, and one thing I realized is, and something I'll come back to later. Someone once told me, if you're not bringing to work every day what you brought the first day of work, you really should revisit what you're doing, right? Are you as excited and passionate about what you're doing? For me at that point, what I realized was closing the books at the end of the month wasn't the most exciting thing, right? Was I leading and driving the business? I was learning new skills, which was great and would help me later in life, but it really wasn't my passion. I wasn't diving as deep as I wanted to do. So I took a step back at that point. I went off the fast track and this path that was going up, and said, wow, I really want to take some time. I want to add value, grow, enjoy what I do. And for me, it went back to technology. My first job out of school. I got off the path, essentially. And I came back to that decision and said, that is really where my heart is. And I see so much opportunity in the industry. So I left Lucent, which, was a tough decision at the time. They were investing in me. I was investing in them. I had a great career, and to leave that midstream with so much opportunity, it was tough, but I knew it was the right thing. The day I left, it was sad to leave a lot of great colleagues, but it was exciting. And I started my own company, a small IT company at the time, again, taking some risk and and developing that. And I wound up working with AT&T and Lucent as basically my own small business. So a lot
what did your business do?
We provided IT, basically contracts to AT&T and Lucent. And, one of the benefits I'll say is, it was an area I was passionate about, but when you're running the finance organization, what drives an organization to cut costs, and I knew I could sell great value add to those companies and how they can cut costs through IT. So I used some of those accounting skills to come back and really start my own business and grow it through AT&T and Lucent and a couple other companies at the time. And over time, I learned a lot, and running a small business it's a lot of work. I love the entrepreneurial mindset. Provides great opportunity. But for me, I still wanted something bigger, and I didn't think I can get there fast enough as an individual small business. So I sold off my contracts. And I knew I wanted to get back into more of a corporate setting. And then I moved to, I enjoyed, I think the benefits of large companies for small companies, there's pros and cons to each. There's a lot of flexibility, maybe a little less bureaucracy in small organizations. But large organizations, there's a lot of benefit, a lot of resources behind, if you have big ideas, where maybe small businesses struggle with those, especially in their early years. So for me, I was looking for, a little bit more resource behind me than my own wallet at the time. And running a small business is tough, I'll tell you that. But so I went to work at Lockheed Martin. I saw a program open, and it was somewhat related to the contracts I was driving at AT&T and Lucent. So it was an easy transition as I sold off my contracts that existed there. And I went to work at Lockheed Martin, and we worked on a defense program, which at that time, I didn't have a lot of government experience. I was working mostly in the commercial space. Began to work with a lot of government customers, was really interested in, things we could do to really, in this case, it was serving a lot of the DoD community and the intelligence community, and providing a service to, the public sector space really became a passion of mine. Through that work, this was kind of in the mid 90s, I came across, we were working with a company called Microsoft on a project. I didn't know much about Microsoft at the time, besides Windows 95 had just come out and that kind of thing. And I knew it was a very successful company, and this guy, Bill Gates, was pretty impressive. And I had the opportunity to go over to their campus one day out in Seattle, and I was just memorized. Everywhere I looked, there were people passionate about what they do. I mean, they were working 24/7, but it wasn't because they had to. They were passionate about their mission and vision and what they were doing and driving every day. And I'll tell you what, that was infectious. And that's something I learned looking back when I became a leader, to drive that same kind of behavior, to make people really excited about when you talk about a mission and vision of an organization and passion for what they do. That's so critical for a leader to be able to do that. And obviously the return is tenfold in what you get with your workforce, of course. If people are loving what they do and happy about what they do and excited to come to work each day. So for me, that was an opportunity then to come over, and, it was our project, essentially they invited a couple of us to come over and work at Microsoft. So I started Microsoft, now I guess 22 years ago or so, as an engineer, running one of our, government businesses and selling some of the products we did at the time. And that's how I started at Microsoft. And slowly what happened at Microsoft, again, another transition happened in my career. I went from IT or criminal justice and IT and finance. All of a sudden now an opportunity came up in Microsoft to get into a sales career. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. I never thought I'd have a career in sales, right? And this is something I still say to this day. It's, when I think of the word sales, right, I picture, selling vacuums and knives, right? When I was in college, one of my winters, I sold vacuums. It was my college job. It was a humbling experience. It's very hard to do. It's basically cold call, knock on doors and do that. But you learn a lot from doing those kinds of roles for sure. So I entered a sales career, and the way I look at sales, and I'll describe it to anyone that's considering that kind of path, sales is, it's not really when, I picture selling a, used car, right? The typical, stereotype that you would think of in a, some dirty car dealership thing that really, or they're haggle and finagle you, but that's really not what sales, especially in the commercial world, is. It's all it is solving problems, right? And that's what my job became at, Microsoft. It was helping our government customers solve their problems. Ideally using our technology was the goal. That's, I guess, the sales aspect behind it all. So for me, that was exciting. I'm like, wow, problem solver. I love this job, right? Every day getting a new problem, a new challenge. How can you not get excited about that? And having certainly the technology and resources and name of a Microsoft behind you to help solve those problems, I mean, with the R&D they had, it was almost, unlimited, the potential opportunity there. So that was exciting. So I started as an engineer, went through different roles, and entered the sales career, and traveled through the company in different locations, different experiences. And my last role when I left Microsoft, I ran a government sales team. We drove about $2 billion in revenue for the company, led a large organization across the country. And it was a great business. And, we were growing, unlimited, right? And especially as new technology would change all the time. And that's one of the things I think I love about technology overall is it's constantly changing, right? That's, we talk about times like this with COVID and the environment that we're in right now. I always said that with IT, and every time, Microsoft had this thing, every year we would reorg, right? And a lot of companies do this, especially in the IT, reorganization. We're going to shuffle the deck and change roles and cards. You'd have a new job like every other year. And some people, they struggle with it. And one thing I always would say to my team is like, well, I mean, change is inevitable, especially in technology. And, frankly, if you don't like change, it might not be the right business to be in versus maybe, sticking to a typewriter sales role. But it provides so much opportunity. So one of the things I found in my career, though, that I thought was interesting is, as I advanced, and I think what really provided me some great opportunity is, certainly, having performing well, right? You can't get anywhere if you actually don't perform. But having a strong network, super important, strong mentors along the way, and sponsors both inside and outside of Microsoft for me. That would be great to help me in my career, sponsor me for different opportunities, give me advice, give me connections. And it's a two-way street having that, right? It takes effort on your own part, but it takes effort on the other people as well. So finding mentors and sponsors who are really committed to that relationship is important, but also going out and making the effort yourself. Yeah. And kind of doing that, one thing I'll say is, when I looked at roles, very similar to all these other paths along the way, is even at Microsoft, I had this kind of weird knack for, if I was ever kind of pointing towards or maybe given an opportunity to, let's say, run a new team, for me, it was probably less exciting if it was an existing business. I always loved to find, as a new technology popped up, or an opportunity to build a new team. Like when I first started at Microsoft, we didn't have a state and local government business, right? We just kind of sold to everyone in a geography. There was no one really specialized on that. And we had this idea of like, well, it'd be great if you actually understood your customer to go provide them solutions. So let's build a business of people that understand government, and do that. So the idea of starting a new business was great. Or if there was an underperforming business, that was always exciting to me too. If there was a business that was struggling, wow, why are they struggling? I'd love to dig in and see what I could do to turn those around. There's nothing like going into a business that's already blown it out and trying to raise the bar versus finding a business that's struggling. It's much easier to set a new bar there for sure. It kind of goes to, there's a saying in business, some of you may not heard before, it's kind of skate to where the puck is going, not where it's been. And that's something, I've always tried to do in my career is where's the opportunity to learn more, grow more, and provide more, right? Provide more solutions, fix more problems, whatever it may be for people. And I encourage people to think that way too. It's, I just had a career conversation with somebody who's a senior at the Citadel a couple nights ago. And one of the things we talked about in kind of looking at careers is find growing areas, find growing businesses. And that will provide you unlimited opportunities you never even heard of, to find, a place for you to grow your career.
I think that's, first of all, it's an amazing story. I mean, that is just a heck of a path. And the fact that you're a resource right here on campus at the business school. So seniors that watch this and have an interest in asking about those various parts of your career as a Crim J finance, engineering, and sales person, that's a pretty incredible trajectory. I'm going to ask you two more questions. The first one's very short, which is, how did you find the Citadel and how did you get to Charleston? And the second question is, we've asked all of our interviewees this. This is the last question interview. It's, okay, you've given them a lot of great advice. Is there anything else, thinking of yourself sitting in that chair at age 22, 23, 21 years old, that you wish you knew then that you now know? So first, how did you get to Charleston? And second, what do you wish you had known?
Yeah. So one thing I'll say about, I'll start with Charleston. It's, I feel very lucky in my career, and that's one thing. If you love to travel, think about that when you think about your career too. If there's opportunities for that, my career has given me the opportunity. I think I've been to now 49 out of 50 states. For some reason, Arkansas still haven't found a way to get there. And been to numerous countries along the way, both for fun and for work. And, they provide me great experiences to see the world and see what's out there. It's hard to compare, places around the world if you've never really been there and experienced it. And sometimes it's not just an overnight trip, but really being able to spend time somewhere. But I'll never forget, I was in, my wife and I and my boys were in Northern Virginia, just outside DC at the time. And, for me, a big driver was kind of climate, culture. Being close to family is important to me. A lot of my family's on the East Coast, so that kind of limits you as much as, Hawaii sounds like a wonderful location. I knew for me, staying on the East Coast was important. But my wife and I, we had this thing where we said, okay, let's we'll take a couple long weekends every few months and explore different areas of the country to, maybe spots for down the road to relocate. And Charleston came up on the list as one of the places we'd love to check out. And of course, it was, I think, like a mid-October weekend when it's, not 170,000 degrees outside and not humid. It was beautiful outside. DC, tends to be a bit of a rat race there. And it's, so it's, so much traffic and congestion. Not like we don't see that now in Charleston. So it was definitely a big change of pace. But one thing I loved about Charleston is, not only the climate and the people are so friendly. I grew up in New Jersey, so right, the Northeast to Southeast. I mean, there's people in New Jersey are their own kind of friendly, right? It's you got to get to know people a little bit. But when you come to Charleston, it's just by default, everyone is just outgoing. People wave to you on the street. It's the oddest thing when you grew up in cities, right? I grew up just outside New York City area. So it's, if someone waves to you, you're like, what's their motive, right? Here it's, look, people are just crazy friendly. It's a great place. I was thinking to raise my boys and experience life, enjoy the beaches. And
did you basically retire from Microsoft, or did you just say, I'm done?
Yeah, I've been in the Charleston area since about 2008. So I finished.
Oh, you were working here with Microsoft.
I was working here.
Okay, I understand.
But the company, we didn't even at a time have an office here. Microsoft now is a small office here and that kind of thing. But the company tolerated the idea. My wife also worked at Microsoft too, of us both relocating down. And my team was spread across the whole country, and my wife's team was across the whole East Coast at the time. So, I think my boss said, well, as long as they have an airport, I'm good. So I think I had only a couple of people for me that worked in the DC area. So it really being close there didn't matter. And, now we're all very comfortable with video conferencing and that kind of thing. Microsoft, being a tech company, this was all kind of inherent in a lot of our work behavior early. So the idea of remote working wasn't as much of a stretch as some industries, I think, are just realizing, the capabilities of that now, essentially being forced to do it with COVID. So we came down, had a beautiful weekend, and said, wow, what an amazing place. The people, the climate, the culture. I was so impressed with downtown, the number of restaurants available for such a small city. Having lived in New York, Seattle, London, DC before, Charleston just offered so much. And the one thing I really love is it's got this entrepreneurial flair to it. The business environment here, it's crazy. It reminds me in some ways of Silicon Valley, much on a smaller scale, of course. But it's really got that feel to it in incubating new talent in business and people starting their own businesses. I love that. That's one of the things actually I really liked about Microsoft when I went there is, as much as it's a big company, it still had a small business feel. You still got to be entrepreneurial when you ran your own business. And I see that all over Charleston. The businesses that run here, there's so much new ideas and energy and excitement. And for me, that was exciting for me, a place where I felt like I can contribute back even after my time at Microsoft.
Mm-hmm. All right, last question.
And real quick, too, the Citadel, too. So certainly I had worked with at Microsoft a bunch of people that went to the Citadel. So my experiences were always, the bar was set very high from every interaction of everyone I came across. When I moved down here, certainly meeting a lot of people from the Citadel and the reputation the Citadel had, The strong network it provides its graduates is amazing. It's probably, I think, one of the best I've seen across, my career in the workforce. I saw it when I worked at Lockheed Martin. I saw it when I worked at Microsoft. So it's an incredibly valuable resource. I love that everyone is so committed there. I mean, when you go to the Citadel, you're choosing a different kind of path than a typical college, right? And you're developing skills, I think, that you just won't get at another institution. So the idea of teaching somewhere where students that are that committed really see the importance of leadership. When I think about the different values the Citadel has, right? It's so important for me that when I see that in the workforce, and that's the kind of things, I love my family to see as well. I think there's such respect for the institution that, I'm proud to give back and spend some time.
I think one of the challenges for cadets is they are very hardworking, and they hear about leadership and core values so much that it almost becomes like, they feel like it's overkill. But what they do not realize from inside the institution is that once they leave, that is not a very common conversation unless you join an organization that really focuses on that. And so those two things, the ability to really grind and work hard, which they've proven by graduating from the Citadel, and the ability to carry themselves as principal leaders. They know what they're about. They're going to develop who they are, and they've got a foundation here at the Citadel. Those are two very powerful items. Okay,
on that note, so I'm going to just take you off 1 second there. So I'll give you one exact experience. So, I was a hiring manager, and we had a college hiring program a couple years back. And, here's the one thing, we're going to get tons of resumes at companies like Microsoft. How do you stand out? I'll be honest with you, just having the Citadel on your resume makes you stand out. Having known people, I would see resumes, and there were a handful of schools in my mind. Always I thought about the Citadel and the academies. If I ever saw a resume with on it, that would go to the top of my pile instantly, because I know that student was bringing something additional to the table. That while there's a ton of great universities out there, it does bring a little something special. So it does carry a lot of weight when you leave the Citadel as well.
All right, last question. What last piece of advice would you give, wishing you had known when you were a senior in college that you know today?
I'd say a couple things. One is, when you first start your career, if you don't have a good depth and understanding of things like, I have a passion for this now and teaching young kids around personal finance. It's, when you start your career, and you're going to start making some money, and you're also going to get offered loans and credit cards and debt and mortgages and all those things. One thing, and look, money for the sake of money is one thing, but really what it provides you is a lot of flexibility and options. And for me, the ability to make career changes, as well as, to take a step back from a big career and really follow something I love to do. If you make big mistakes, it gets harder to do those things, right? To have choices and have flexibility. So certainly, I encourage everyone to have a good depth of a personal finance understanding, just outside of work, and, take advantage.
Where would you point them to get their depth of personal finance understanding?
Yeah, I mean, silly things you could do. One is, hey, feel free to ping me anytime. I'll be happy to help you. I'm not a financial advisor, but I love to educate and teach people. If you guys have a personal finance club, and I'd love to come chat with everybody there as well. But there's so many things like subscribe to the Wall Street Journal, right? You can learn so much by doing that. When you're not in class, right? And if you have time, or even recording, CNBC, Fox Business Channel, watching shows like that, you just start learning a lot, right? And reading a lot. And for me, it's about that kind of always growing, always learning mentality. The more you can absorb and think and know, and talk to people in the industry, right? Get a lot of feedback. I think that's really important to do, to keep learning. Kind of this whole idea of constantly learning. That's the other thing I'd say, looking back is, I love to read. And I didn't really when I was in college. It was kind of more something after it. And I kind of forced myself as I was doing all these crazy career changes along the way. I had to read, I had to learn, I had to keep growing. And I encourage everyone to do that. You'll pick up things that are, great great nuggets, right? And you won't get everything out of one book or whatever it may be. There are many great leaders following people online these days, whether it's, like there's Simon Sinek out there. When I was growing up, reading books by Jack Welch was really big in the business world, right? So, and that had an impact on my career and how I thought. And I really don't plug many books. There are just so many good authors out there, right? That write so many good things. But I will make one shameless plug because this book really changed me later in my career and had me think differently. And I definitely encourage everyone to pick it up. It's called Mindset. It's Carol Dweck is the author. This is a great book, and it's about this concept of a growth mindset and an always learning mentality. And if you really adopt that, no matter what you do in your career, or even in life, it doesn't even have to be your career. You'll find this in everything you do. I talk about personal finance as an example. It'll really help you and take you to a new level, and help you.
I think that's a challenge for cadets who are part of this 24-hour cadet system. It's very, I wouldn't say it's not scripted, but there are a lot of wickets you have. Once you choose which way you're going, the wickets you have to pass through in order to graduate. Not so in the real world. You have to set your own wickets. And I think Mindset is a great recommendation. It's a great book. It's a great concept for thinking about, man, I don't have to read for class anymore. What should I read? And what would I enjoy reading? Or what should I read that I might not enjoy as much, but I need to build that foundation? So, Jeff, this is really great advice. I'm going to make sure we stay a little bit on timeline here so that you don't want to be the longest video in the library. They have to watch the video to get all of your good knowledge. So with that, I just want to thank you one more time, and go see Jeff at the School of Business if you have any other questions or follow on. Jeff, thank you so much.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Have a good one.